Hey everybody, David from Flash by Cycle Nut here. Last couple weeks I've been working on the little ZX4RR Screamer. It's been taking all my time, but I didn't want to completely abandon all my other bikes. I'm sure they're feeling the neglect. So while I'm waiting for parts being rushed across from me for me all across the world, I'm going to put a new chain and sprockets on the h2sx. I'll go over the steps and how to do this for you. I went with steel rear and front sprocket. A lot of times I'll do aluminum or do 520 kits. On this, the bike's making 250 horsepower. I stuck with 530 and stuck with steel. Tools that I'll need is, this is a rotary wheel. I'll put a grinder on there to grind off the old rivets. That's a ProMotion chain link, or chain riveting tool. And so it's really not that different than most, but because we have the clutch master cylinder right there outside of the countershaft sprocket, it does make it a little bit more challenging. So I'll make a video for you guys. So the first thing we want to do whenever we're replacing a chain is get that counter sprocket nut loose. It's far easier with everything hooked up and tight. So that's the first thing we're going to do. So the first thing I'm going to do to get to it is I'm going to remove the bolts on that master cylinder. And you can see there's 4 of them. So I'm going to get all 4 of them off. So I removed those 4 bolts, and it looks like I only had to remove those 3, no one below it. And I got some funky looking shit down there in behind the master cylinder. So I'm going to clean all that out, wipe it down, and then I'm going to be sure not to squeeze my clutch lever while I'm doing this. All right, I cleaned that barrel out with some alcohol. Now I'm gonna, you can see I put this bolt back in because I didn't need to remove it. Now I'm gonna remove this bolt, and there's a push pin there, and then there's a push pin under there, and I think the countershaft sprocket cover will come off. And it did. And now we're looking at the countershaft sprocket, which mine looks incredibly just horrible, dry and nasty, even though I lube my chain quite a bit. This is telling me I probably need to lube my chain even more. So let's see if we're able to get this out. This is a 19 tooth because I had this on there when I was doing my 200 mile an hour run. I'm going to go back to the stock 18. So what I'm going to do is flatten out or push that washer back away because that's kind of like the locking mechanism. And then I'm going to get my air gun and see if I can get that bolt loose. Okay, I use a combination of taking a long flat blade screwdriver and getting it in there and start to pry it away. And then once I get enough room to get it in there, I just like to use an 3/8 extension and a hammer, and then I just hammer around to make sure it's all flat. So now I'm going to go get the socket, the impact wrench, and fire up my compressor, and we'll get that nut off. And plus, make sure the bike's in gear. Countershaft sprocket's nut is loose. As you can see, the impact wrench really is, driver's really helpful there. Now I'm just going to leave that on, and I'm going to pick a chain link, and I'm going to grind the ends of 2 of them off with my Dremel wheel. So this is the grinding wheel that I used, and you can see the rivet. You can't really see that the rivets are on it anymore, and once it's like at that point, it will press out with the chain tool. So I'll get that set up. Here's the riveting tool set up. I got nothing behind it because I'm going to press that pin out. I got the pin that I'm going to press her just sticking out very slightly. I got the handle on it and the thing. So I'm just going to put it on like that and tighten it down, and then screw it. And I only had to press out 1 pin, and as soon as I pressed it out, the chain fell apart. So at this point, I have the chain off, and the front counter sprocket pulled right off without the chain on it. There was plenty of room. That's a chain guard to prevent, if the chain snaps, from it snapping into your cases and cracking your engine cases. Ask me how I know about that. I made a mistake. I should have taken this all off before I removed the chain. So we'll see how it goes. Since this is my first time doing it, I'm going to follow what the service manual says. Imagine that. So the first thing it wants me to do is pull off the sprocket guard. So we're going to do that, and then it wants me to pull off the back tire. So we'll do that. I took off the rear wheel, which meant removing the Brock's pentacarbon silencer, and now it wants me to remove that cotter pin, so I'm going to do that next. So I have the cotter pin out, so it wants me to hold that nut while I turn that nut out. Let's see how this goes. So now that that's loose, I can just pull off the nut and the little washer behind it, and this coupling will pull. There we go. Pull. And once that's out, the sprocket carrier just pulls right off. So we're going to remove those nuts and install a new one. So you can see that I've put some graphite lubricant on the spindle because this gets kind of dry, and you can see it's there. So I'm gonna clean all this off, keep it well lubricated. This is something that's a known issue where this stuff gets really dry, so make sure you keep it lubricated. So I got the sprocket off the carrier. I got the new OEM sprocket here to make sure it's lined up the same. There's a recess on that side that goes down when I'm doing it like this, and I'll set it all up, and I'm gonna clean that. So I got the new sprocket on the back on that carrier. They're torqued down to 44 foot-pounds. I checked the hub, make sure it sounds good and greased. I'm gonna put a little grease on this before I put it back on place. I like Motul products, and I'm using their Tech Grease 300 to grease everything up here. I've also done a decent job of cleaning everything up. It's a dirty area of the bike, but cleaning stuff lets you make sure everything looks good, linkages look good. I'll give your bike a good once over. I don't think it's an area that you want to spit shine, because it's just going to get really dirty when you ride it again, but I do like cleaning some stuff off. So I put the sprocket carrier back on, lining up the paint marks on the outer hub to what's in there, and then I'm just going to put the coupling back in the way it was, and we'll tighten that down. So this was a double torque sequence. First tightened the nut to 118 foot-pounds, and then loosened it and tightened it again to 148 foot-pounds, and I didn't have a torque wrench to 148 foot-pounds, so I used my air. Now, God, don't tell anybody. When we do the two-step, it's usually the seat bearings, get everything to seat right, and loosen it, and then retighten it to spec. Now I'm gonna put the cotter pin in, and we're making some progress. Get the rear wheel back on, the pentacarbon canister back on. Gonna put the front sprocket back on, and there's no difference in sides. You can see that the lip is the same on each, so I'll just default it to the writing out. Really simple, just put that on. It's just hand tight now, and I make sure I have that locking washer back. So far I put the countershaft sprocket on with the lock nut behind it. I loosened up the rear hub, and I've moved the sprocket assembly as far forward as possible, so now we're going to lay the chain in place so we can get a measurement on it. So, pretty crazy enough, when I moved my sprocket all the way forward and I put the new chain and lined it up, there was not enough chain to have to take a link out of it. It was the right length. So I got pretty lucky I don't have to take a link out. But if you did, you just always have to make sure you're at the two smaller sides so that the new link can go into both of them, which means you really got to take out like 2 links to get back to where you started. So, but in this case now I'm just riveting on the new tool. So first I'm just pressing this on, going back and forth till I get enough, and then I'm going to peen that over with the tool. So there's the rivet tool where I flared out the ends on it. And so now that's the chain's complete. So all I'm going to do now is set my chain tension. And then I got to put my sprocket cover back on and rebolt my master cylinder back up. So I set the chain tension, put the chain guard back on. I got my counter sprocket tightened up, and I flared over the lock tab. I use a 3/8 extension and a screwdriver. Get that over. I also wiped down the chain some to get rid of like the exuberant amount of white grease they have on it that just will get everywhere on the first ride. So I cleaned off to just lessen that a little bit. Now sprocket cover. Cover's back on except for one bolt. Put the gasket on, then my slave cylinder. I think I called it master cylinder a bunch of times, but really a slave cylinder. Either way, you know what I was talking about. Master cylinder back on, torque to spec. Cover back on. We are done. It took a little longer than I thought. I think it was about 2.5 hours. Just kind of poked my way through it, but it's done correctly, and I got a new sprocket and chain on. 90K 3D chain, look good. Thanks guys for watching. Remember to hit the subscribe button if you want to see more motorcycle related content.